In June 2024, a 29-year-old man collapsed in an internet cafe in Wenzhou, China. His body sat in the chair for 30 hours before anyone noticed. The other gamers around him kept playing. They didn't call anyone. 20 years earlier, in South Korea, a 28-year-old named Yi Sung-suk had just lost his job. So he sat down in a PC bang, a Korean internet cafe, and played StarCraft for 50 consecutive hours until his heart gave out. And the other gamers kept playing around him too. 2 deaths in 2 countries, 20 years apart, and the exact same scene. China responded with the most aggressive gaming crackdown in history. South Korea and Japan tried their own versions, but all 3 failed.
I can't stop. I can't help myself.
Because every single one of them attacked the symptom and left the cause untouched. I'm John. I study East Asian societies, and I spent years in the gaming industry, working as a research manager at a major publisher. So I understand the sociology and psychology behind gaming addiction. 3 forces made this inevitable, and a third one is actively killing teenagers. In the next few minutes, we'll break down what China and others tried, why a sociologist from 1938 predicted their failure better than anyone alive today, and what a Vietnam War heroin study reveals about the real cause of gaming addiction. So let's start with what China actually did. August 2021, Chinese state media publishes an editorial calling video games 精神鸦片, spiritual opium. And the historical weight of opium in China is not subtle. This is the government that remembers the Opium Wars, reaching for the most culturally loaded word in its entire vocabulary to describe kids playing Honor of Kings on their phones. The new rules landed fast. Minors could play 1 hour per day, Friday through Sunday only, 3 hours per week, real name verification for every account, facial recognition spot checks at random intervals, and Tencent, which controls nearly half of China's gaming market, rolled out compliance systems within weeks. The old physical infrastructure of gaming was already dying on its own. More than 45,000 internet cafes closed between 2020 and 2024. Smartphones made them obsolete. COVID accelerated the decline, and the new ID regulations finished the job. The communal escape valve was shutting down. Gaming went private onto phones, into bedrooms and toilet cubicles, and behind closed doors. So Tencent reported that minors now accounted for just 1.5% of their total gaming revenue, and claimed minor playtime hit a record low compared to 2020. And a 2022 industry report claimed that 3 in 4 minors were gaming fewer than 3 hours a week. By every official metric, the policy was working. But independent researchers found something very different. More than 3 in 4 minors were bypassing the real name verification system entirely, using parents' IDs, VPNs, or accounts on foreign platforms like Steam that Chinese regulators couldn't touch.
I don't know why I'm doing this.
And the workarounds became their own industry. Police busted a facial recognition fraud ring selling access to adult gaming accounts. About 3,000 minors involved, worth roughly 12,000 USD in transactions. Teenagers were paying other people to pass the face scan for them, and both sides were performing. Tencent reported compliance because it gave them regulatory cover, and the gray market kept their active user accounts healthy. The government claimed success because the alternative was admitting that the world's largest surveillance apparatus couldn't stop teenagers from playing a mobile game. Both sides had the incentive to maintain the theater. And the kids who stopped gaming? They didn't go outside or study more. They migrated to short video platforms, which weren't covered by the gaming restrictions. And researchers flagged these platforms as potentially more harmful than gaming itself, because short video is algorithmically designed to maximize passive consumption, not the active skill-based engagement that gaming at least provides. Basically, you shut down one outlet and the demand finds another. And this wasn't even the only ban that China rolled out that year. They used the same exact logic on the $100 billion private tutoring industry and got the exact same result. I break down that story up here. But China had the heaviest hand. Korea and Japan tried something different. Yi Sung-suk's death in 2005 rewired South Korean politics and became the catalyst for a decade of gaming legislation that would prove just as futile as China's approach. In 2011, South Korea passed the Cinderella Law, banning online gaming for anyone under 16 between midnight and 6 a.m. It was supposed to be the responsible version of China's heavy hand, but in a democracy. Korea ran this experiment for 10 years, And their best sign of success was teenagers were able to sleep an extra 90 seconds per night. 10 years of legislation, enforcement infrastructure, compliance monitoring, and public debate for a minute and a half of additional sleep. And the reason was because the law didn't cover mobile gaming. So similar to China, kids switched platforms from internet cafes to their phones, which they could use anywhere, anytime. South Korea abolished the Cinderella Law in 2021 and shifted to parent-set limits and voluntary self-regulation. By 2022, regulators were still tracking consoles while mobile gaming ran completely unchecked across 700 million devices. And by 2024, internet cafe visits had dropped to just 7.4% of gamers. In other words, Korean gaming migrated to platforms regulators couldn't see. Japan represents another approach entirely. In 2020, Kagawa Prefecture passed Japan's first gaming ordinance, 60 minutes per day on weekdays, 90 minutes per day on weekend for minors. But the ordinance is non-binding. No penalties, no enforcement, no compliance data. When a citizen challenged it in court, the judge dismissed the case because the law doesn't actually compel anything. It's the legal equivalent of a please don't litter sign. And Japan has about 1.5 million hikikomori, mostly men in severe social withdrawal, many who game extensively. But the research is clear. Gaming doesn't cause hikikomori. Gaming is what people do during withdrawal. It's a parallel response to the same societal conditions, and I talk a lot about it in this video here. So 3 countries with 3 approaches spanning the full spectrum from maximum state power to basically a suggestion. And all 3 produced the same outcome. The underlying problem persisted. The escape behavior adapted, and not a single government can point to measurable improvement in youth mental health. The kids aren't sleeping longer, they aren't studying more, they aren't happier. The only thing that changed is where they go to disappear. The irony is that the same government that labeled gaming spiritual opium also fund esports teams and hand their best gamers military exemptions. That's the contradiction that has an explanation, but it requires understanding what's actually driving the escape. I talk about the rise of gaming in East Asia here, so check it out if you're interested. The bans failed because they targeted the valve. The pressure comes from somewhere else completely. The gaming ban and tutoring ban are companion policies. The same government, the same year, the same logic. You ban tutoring to ease academic burden. You ban gaming to protect mental health. Both assume the behavior is the problem, and neither touches the system that produces the behavior, the Gaokao, China's national college entrance exam. Over 13 million students take the Gaokao every year. That's roughly the entire population of Pennsylvania sitting in one test. In the top 39 universities, the 985 tier, which is the gateway to any meaningful career mobility, admit under 2%. Picture a school of 1,500 students. Roughly 30 make it. That's 1 kid per classroom, if you're lucky. And every student sitting in the room knows the odds before they turn 15.
May the odds be ever in your favor.
And this is where a framework from 1938 does its heaviest work. Sociologist Robert Merton asked a question that explains gaming in East Asia better than anything written since. What happens when a society promises everyone they can succeed, but blocks most people from actually succeeding? He called it strain theory. You study 16 hours a day for an exam that admits fewer than 1 in 50. Anything below that, and you're likely stuck with a mediocre job for the rest of your life. That gap between promise and reality is where gaming lives. Merton predicted 5 responses, and 3 of them are playing out in this video. Innovation, retreatism, and rebellion. We covered innovation already. That's how kids use a parent's ID or how fraud rings sell face scans. They accepted the goal, but rejected the rules. Retreatism is the one 3 governments have spent 2 decades trying to ban. You give up on the goal and the approved path to get there. You withdraw into a parallel world where different rules apply. Gaming is that parallel world. And Merton would have predicted something else, that the same gap would produce 2 completely different responses, and the government will treat them in 2 completely different ways. In China, lying flat is Merton's rebellion. It started in 2021 when a factory worker posted a manifesto online. He quit his job and lived cheaply. and declared he'd rather lie down than grind for a system that wasn't going to reward him anyway. The post went viral. Millions of young Chinese adopted the label, refusing overtime, marriage, grinding for apartments that they couldn't afford, and competing in a race with no finish line. The government scrubbed the forums, censored the hashtags, and banned lying flat merchandise. But the sentiment just moved underground. Lying flat is public refusal. Gaming addiction is private retreat. And the government treats them very differently. Lying flat gets censored, gaming gets banned. Even though merchant will tell you their responses to the same gap between promise and reality. And the kids hiding PC sessions during 12 to 16-hour study days tend to describe the same logic. Gaming is the only domain where effort actually produces results. The sentiment shows up across forums, clinical interviews, and academic literature on coping-motivated gaming. That's the retreatism mechanism in real time. And counselors working in China's remaining internet addiction treatment centers consistently describe the same profile among the teenagers they treat: a sense of emptiness, an inability to meet parental expectations, and a retreat into the only environment that responds to effort with reward. You could write that same clinical description for a teenager in Seoul or Osaka without changing a word. Because the strain isn't uniquely Chinese. South Korea's Suno compressed lifetime outcomes into a single exam. Japan's university entrance exam does the same. And in both countries, the promise that's supposed to justify the suffering, elite universities, stable career, secure life, broke a generation ago.
那前一个晚上，我清楚地记得，其实我就是紧张到就是那种睡觉的时候。
The exam still demands everything, but the reward no longer delivers. Durkheim called that state anomie, when the old rules stop working, but nobody's written the new ones yet. And the human cost of that anomie is why Korea leads the developed world in suicides. I did a deep dive on that, so I'll put it here. So the promise gap exists, but a lot of activities could serve as escape. Alcohol, gambling, sleeping all day. Gaming fills this particular void because of something specific about what it provides. There's a reason gaming specifically, and not any other escape, absorbs this pressure so completely. Psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan identified the three things people need to feel motivated: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. I call it CAR because it takes you to places in life. And East Asian exam systems crush all three at once. Competence is a big question mark. 16 hours of study, and you can still Asian fail when admission rates sit below 1 in 50. So effort stops converting to anything. Autonomy gets destroyed by schedules running from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., where every hour is dictated. And I mean every hour, including which practice problems to solve, which pages to memorize, and how long to eat lunch. And relatedness gets stretched quietly. Every hour with friends is an hour not studying, and the system punishes you for choosing friends. At the end of the day, you're left with a broken car. Gaming delivers all three. Your rank reflects your actual skill, that's competence. You choose what to play and how to play it, that's autonomy. And you build real social bonds through multiplayer, forums, and guild systems. That's relatedness. And there's a neurological reason the pull is so strong. Gaming delivers immediate dopamine feedback. Every quest completed, every level cleared, every loot dropped triggers the brain reward circuitry in real time. And winning produces serotonin, the neurochemical signature of status and accomplishment.
Yes, sir!
I used to work in gaming research, and one thing the industry understands very well is reward loops. Games are built to make progress feel constant because that's the feeling that keeps people engaged. Study for 16 hours, and a reward is months or years away, and statistically unlikely to arrive at all. The brain simply isn't naturally built for delayed and uncertain rewards. It chases the loops where effort turns into progress almost immediately. And then you close the laptop and you're back to Nedra, involution, the national pastime for grinding harder for diminishing returns. This is why banning gaming doesn't work on a psychological level. Gaming provides what schools can't, and when it's removed without treating the distress underneath, the research shows that some kids turn to other escapes: alcohol, sleeping all day, and deeper withdrawal. And the clinical data confirms this. Gaming disorder almost never appears in isolation. The standard clinical profile is depression, anxiety, and stress. Conditions that co-occur with gaming, not conditions that gaming caused. Coping motivated gamers, people who play specifically to escape the stress rather than for fun, show much stronger addiction-like symptoms than people who game for enjoyment, which means treating gaming addiction without treating the depression underneath is exactly as effective as treating alcoholism without treating the pain that creates the drinking. You can lock the liquor cabinet, but the person is still in pain. And some clinics have figured this out. At Chungang University Hospital in Seoul, researchers ran a randomized trial on over 200 patients with internet gaming disorder. Cognitive behavioral therapy targeting the depression, anxiety, and social avoidance underneath the gaming, not the screen time. 2/3 of the therapy group improved. Gaming hours dropped without forced limits, and the pattern holds at the individual level. A patient named Kim was 24 when he entered treatment at Seoul's Hora Clinic, StarCraft and League of Legends, 27-hour sessions, failing every exam he took. After 18 months treating his depression and social anxiety, Kim reduced his gaming to under 2 hours a day on his own. Nobody took his computer away. The depression that made gaming feel necessary was treated, and the gaming took care of itself. And the pattern holds when programs treat the person, not the platform. But no clinic can out-treat a system that keeps producing the pressure, and some governments skipped therapy entirely and went straight to punishment. Remember the word spiritual opium? The government meant it as condemnation, but it's actually the most revealing thing they've said about this entire crisis. Because opium in Chinese history was never only a story about weak people making bad choices. The Qing dynasty's opium crisis happened during societal and economic collapse, foreign invasions, and a population with no upward mobility. The world offered nothing worth being sober for, and that's merchants' retreatism. And the structural conditions rhyme. More than 1 in 5 young Chinese can't find work. Seoul housing costs sit at about 14 years of disposable income. Japan's working poor hasn't recovered from the collapse of the 1990s. When the real world stops rewarding effort, people are tempted to retreat into the worlds that do. The Qing dynasty learned this. The current government is relearning it, and they're making the same mistake. They're criminalizing the symptom. Now, to be clear, gaming doesn't hijack opioid receptors, but the government's own metaphor is more accurate than they intended. They just have the causation backwards. Gaming isn't the opium. The economy is. And the strongest evidence for that comes from an unexpected place. During the Vietnam War, roughly 1 in 5 American soldiers became addicted to heroin. It's in the same opiate family as the British opium the Qing dynasty smoked, but stronger and more addictive. The US government panicked, but when Lee Robbins tracked those soldiers after they came home, she found something shocking. Heroin dependence collapsed after return. Only about 1% became re-addicted in the first year, though about 10% tried heroin again. The environment that sustained the addiction had changed. The rest quit without treatment. The finding was so shocking that the scientific community assumed the study was rigged. But the explanation was actually simple. The environment that sustained the addiction had changed. The soldiers had come home to families, jobs, communities, a world that offered something worth being present for. The addiction wasn't in the drug, it was in the context. And that's a context these governments refuse to fix. But there's a common layer underneath: the family. China's 4-2-1 family structure, 4 grandparents, 2 parents, 1 child, means 6 adults pour every hope into a single kid, and it breaks in 2 directions. For tens of millions of left-behind children, the parents are migrant workers in factory cities, sending money to their rural homes while grandparents raise the kids. The grandparents defer because they don't understand what a 12-year-old is doing on the screen for 10 hours. But the urban kids aren't better off. 6 adults competing to spoil 1 kid produces little emperors who've never heard the word no. The phone is the pacifier, the reward, and the babysitter at the same time. By the time anyone notices gaming is a problem, one set of parents lost the relationship to distance, and the other lost it to indulgence, and neither of them has the standing to intervene. So when these parents finally panic about gaming, they don't have the trust or presence to intervene themselves, so they outsource, and what the market offers them is boot camps. In 2004, a colonel opened China's first internet addiction treatment center, a military-run boot camp in Beijing. 3-month mandatory stays, no phones, no computers, no contact with the outside world. Families paid over 10,000 RMB per month for the privilege of sending their children there. By 2009, more than 250 similar facilities had opened across China, and some of them were using electroconvulsive therapy on teenagers. Electrical shocks applied to children's bodies to cure them of wanting to play video games. The Ministry of Health banned ECT for internet addiction in 2009 after a CCTV expose forced their hand. But internet addiction treatment facilities are still operating across China as of recent years. The camps changed but didn't disappear. The brochures got nicer, but the methods didn't always improve. In 2009, a 15-year-old boy was beaten to death at a boot camp in Guangxi province. His parents had paid to send him there because they thought it would save him. Around 2014 in Henan province, a 19-year-old girl died after being forced into extreme physical exercises. These were children whose crime was being depressed in a system that depresses them, and the cure looked exactly like the disease: control, discipline, and obedience. And the diagnostic tool feeding kids into these camps are shakier than anyone wants to admit. China built the boot camps, but the misdiagnosis is shared across all three countries. The belief that gaming is the disease, not the symptom. A 2025 study of 2,000 South Koreans found moderate public support for classifying gaming disorder as a mental illness. But the reasoning tracked to one concern above all others: fear that gaming distracts from university entrance exams. The clinical evidence barely registered, and the screening tools can't even agree on how big the problem is. Which questionnaire you use changes the result from 3% to nearly 14%, a fourfold swing asking the same people. When your measurement tool swings that much, it's obviously unreliable, and the only reliable thing it's measuring is how hard you're looking. So the pressure creates the gaming. The gaming gets misdiagnosed as pathology, the misdiagnosis creates a treatment industry, and the treatment kills children. But what started the whole cycle remains completely untouched. And there's one final contradiction that proves the misdiagnosis was never really about the children. In December 2023, China's National Press and Publication Administration, the NPPA, proposed spending caps and a ban on daily login rewards for all gamers, not just minors. Within hours, tens of billions of dollars evaporated from Tencent and NetEase's market caps. The draft rules were deleted from the government website within weeks, and the official who proposed them was removed from his position. When forced to choose between curing addiction and protecting the economic engine, the government chose the money, because the adult restrictions hit the real revenue stream, and so it was killed immediately. Hangzhou built multi-million-dollar esports arenas for the 2022 Asian Games. The Chinese government subsidizes esports as a tool of soft power while calling casual gaming a national threat. And South Korea is no different. It gives military exemptions to esports champions, exemptions from the same mandatory military service that shapes every young Korean man's career trajectory. Gaming that generates revenue and national prestige gets celebrated. Gaming that consumes unproductive time gets pathologized. And the only variable that determines which label you get is whether the economy benefits from your playing. Faker games 16 hours a day and he's dedicated. A teenager who games 3 hours a day is addicted. The conditions that created gaming as a retreat haven't improved in any of those countries, and the escape valve has moved. Gaming migrated to smartphones, to private spaces where nobody notices. Harder to detect. You can't solve gaming addiction without solving the exam hell, the economic dead ends, and a sense of isolation that makes a virtual world feel more livable than the real one. And Merchant understood that banning the escape doesn't close the promise gap. It just gives people fewer places to hide from it. Remember that 29-year-old in Wenzhou? The one who sat dead in the chair for 30 hours while people gamed around him? He was there because somewhere along the way, the world outside the screen stopped making sense. 30 hours was how long it took for anyone to notice the difference between a man playing a game and a man who'd stopped breathing. And if you can't tell the difference, maybe the system can't either. If you like this video, you'll like this one. And if you made it this far, don't forget to like and sub.